I go by Dark Veil, and this is one of my grim truth horror stories. If you've seen the video, stop watching it. Don't share it. Don't comment. Don't try to figure out where it was filmed. And if someone sends you a location in the comments, don't go there. Because what you're looking at isn't a stunt. Those people behind me aren't actors. They're not getting paid. They grabbed on, trying to help, and now not one of them can let go. I know how it sounds. I know what you're thinking, because I'd be thinking the same thing. Some guy with a statue and a line of people stumbling behind him like a human paper chain. I'd think it was staged too. I'd probably laugh. But there are 94 people behind me right now, and according to something a historian sent me 6 hours ago, the parade only ends when the chain reaches 100. 6 people more. The problem is, the people on the internet just found out where I am. My name is Callum Voss. I'm 29. I work at a shipping warehouse in Delhart, Ohio. I have a cat named Pretzel and a moderately unhealthy obsession with estate sales. That last part is important. 3 weeks ago, on a Saturday morning that felt completely normal and has since destroyed my life, I went to a thrift store on the edge of town called Margot's Second Life. I go every few weeks. I have a shelf at home dedicated to weird little objects I've paid too much for. A taxidermied squirrel holding a tiny sword, a clock shaped like a bass guitar, and a hand-painted portrait of a man who looks slightly too angry to have agreed to sit for a portrait. So when I saw the Golden Goose on a shelf between a broken humidifier and a bag of mismatched golf clubs, I bought it immediately. It cost $4. It was heavier than it looked, about the size of a loaf of bread, cast in something that felt like iron, but was coated in a gold-colored paint that hadn't aged, hadn't chipped, hadn't scratched. The goose had its head tilted slightly to one side, like it was listening for something just beneath the floor. I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. I named it Gerald. The first incident happened in my apartment parking lot. My neighbor, Dex, saw me carrying Gerald from my car to the building entrance. Dex is the kind of guy who touches everything. He once picked up a wet umbrella from a stranger's porch because he thought it looked interesting. I'm not exaggerating when I say that within 4 seconds of seeing the goose, he had both hands wrapped around it. He didn't let go. I mean that literally. He stood there for 10 seconds, laughing and saying, "This thing is wild. What is this?" And then his expression changed. He pulled his hands. His hands didn't move. He looked at me with this specific face, the face of a man who has just realized something has gone very wrong, but it hasn't fully processed how wrong, and said, "Callum, I can't let go." I thought he was joking. He was not joking. I spent 45 minutes trying to separate Dex from Gerald. I poured water on his hands. I tried to work his fingers loose one at a time. His fingers didn't move. They weren't fused. They weren't stuck in any visible way. They just would not release. Like every muscle in both his hands had simply decided to stay. Eventually, I called his wife, Petra. She came down, assessed the situation with admirable calm for someone confronting the inexplicable at 11 in the morning, and grabbed Dex's arm to try to pull him back. Her hand locked onto his arm. She screamed. Then she started laughing. That was the part that got me. The laughing, not panicked giggling, not nervous laughter, real, deep, involuntary laughter, the kind that overtakes you before you can stop it, the kind that comes from somewhere you don't control. She was terrified, and she couldn't stop laughing. And that combination, that specific combination, is one of the most disturbing things I have ever witnessed. I got my phone out to call for help. My upstairs neighbor, a retired school teacher named Alondra, leaned over her balcony to see what was happening, lost her footing on the railing she was gripping, and instinctively grabbed Petra's shoulder on the way down. She didn't fall. She just stayed. 3 people attached to a Golden Goose in a parking lot at 11:15 on a Saturday morning. Somehow, and I cannot explain this decision in any way that reflects well on me, my first instinct was to film it. It got 2 million views in 4 hours. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. Staged, viral marketing, those hands look fake. This is for a movie. But my favorite was, the goose is CGI, because Gerald was very clearly not CGI. He was $4 from Margot's second life, and he sat in the footage with the solid, indifferent weight of something that had been waiting a long time to be found. By mid-afternoon, 3 more people had joined the chain. A couple who'd seen the video and driven to my apartment complex because they wanted to be in part 2. A delivery driver who genuinely did not see what was happening until it was too late. By nightfall, there were 8. The laughing was constant by then, not all of them laughing at once, but cycling, ebbing and peaking, like they were taking turns. Most of them had stopped trying to pull free. They had the look of people in the middle of something too large to process, present in the body but somewhere else in the mind. I hadn't slept. I was still holding Gerald. I'd been holding Gerald for 14 hours, and my hands had not stuck. I could set him down. I could walk away from him, briefly, if I chose to. I tested this on hour 6. I placed him on the hood of a parked car and walked 20 feet away. He was back in my hands before I understood how he got there. I hadn't gone back for him. I hadn't felt myself move, but there he was, solid and warm and tilted as ever. I don't know how to explain that. I've stopped trying. The only answer that fits is that Gerald chose me as the bearer, and the bearer doesn't get to quit. The historian emailed me at 11:47 p.m. His name was Professor Emmerich Stahl. He taught folklore and mythic history at a university I'd actually heard of, which lent him a credibility I was desperate to extend to anything at that moment. He had seen the video. He wrote in a way that suggested he had been waiting for a long time for a video exactly like this. The story of the Golden Goose, he explained, had been collected and softened over centuries before the Brothers Grimm published their version. The familiar story, youngest son, enchanted goose, chain of stuck followers, Princess Who Couldn't Laugh was a compression of something much older and much darker. The Grimm version ends with a wedding, tidied up, made safe for children. The source material did not end with a wedding. The original curse had been given to a man in a village whose name had not survived translation. What had survived was this. The man was not a fool or a youngest son. He was an ordinary man who had done something to offend a spirit that lived in the old-growth forest at the edge of his town. The records weren't specific about what he had done, which Stahl noted was significant. When old texts go vague about an offense, it's usually because the offense was something ordinary, something small, something anyone might do. The spirit did not kill him. The spirit gave him the goose. And from the moment others touched it, the chain began to form, and a man was forced to walk, village to village, town to town, unable to escape it, unable to stop moving for more than a few hours at a time, dragging a line of laughing, weeping, helpless people behind him like a wound he couldn't close. The curse, Stahl wrote, was not about greed as the Grimm version implied. The greed reading came from a mistranslation of the original German root, which was closer to a word meaning exposure or spectacle. The curse was about humiliation, about being seen, about becoming, against your will, a parade. The chain in the original account reached 100 people. When it did, the curse broke. The man was released, the followers were released, and then, Stahl wrote, with a precision that turned my blood cold, the goose passed to the person who had been last in the chain. And the counting began again. By day 3, there were 61 people behind me. I had learned by then how to manage the chain. Slow, steady walking worked better than stopping. When I stopped for too long, the people near the back became agitated, the laughter sharpening into something that had too much anguish inside it. Moving seemed to help. I don't know if the curse required movement or if the movement just gave everyone something to focus on. We walked through Delhart at 3 a.m. to avoid traffic. We walked the long stretches of the country road outside town during the day because it was easier to move without obstacles. People followed us in cars. They posted updates. Someone had set up a live stream that was running almost continuously. I stopped watching the comments after day 2. A woman named Blythe was second in the chain behind Dex. She was a nurse, 43. She had grabbed Dex's shoulder, trying to help him free himself during those first chaotic minutes in the parking lot, which was exactly the kind of person you'd expect a nurse to be. Because she was so close to the front, we could talk while we walked, when the laughter released her long enough to speak. I found myself wishing repeatedly that I could do something useful for her in return. She wasn't laughing as much by day 3. The laughter seemed to come in waves. During the waves, she couldn't speak. Between them, she told me that it didn't hurt exactly. It was more like her hands had become irrelevant to her. She knew they were there. She just couldn't access them, like a word you know, but you can't say. "What happens at 100? She asked me on the morning of day 3. I told her the chain would break. I did not tell her the rest. I'm recording this on my phone while I walk. There are 94 people behind me now. Dex is still at the front of the chain. He stopped laughing somewhere around person 50. He walks with his eyes fixed on something past the horizon, somewhere past the road and the fields and whatever comes after the fields. I talk to him sometimes. He doesn't always respond, but occasionally he does. Short sentences, words that don't quite string together, and I hold on to those moments harder than I should. Stahl has been in contact every day. He sent me photographs of the original manuscripts, 18th century German, water damaged. The ink so dark it looked like someone had pressed their thumbs into the page. The illustrations were what stayed with me. Crude woodcuts, rough and imprecise, but unmistakable. A man at the front of a line, a goose in his hands, its head tilted, and behind him a chain of figures whose mouths were all open, not screaming and not laughing, both at once. The original man walked for 16 days. I am on day 9. Stahl told me something else last night that I've been sitting with. The manuscript described the spirit that created the curse in a single line, buried in a passage about the forest where it lived. The line translates roughly as, "It does not create suffering for pleasure. It creates spectacle to complete a ritual. When the parade is large enough, the old debt is paid and the spirit rests." Old debt? Stahl doesn't know what debt. The manuscript doesn't say, but it implies the curse wasn't invented for that first man. It implies the curse is much, much older, that the first man we know about was not the first man, that the parade has formed before, many times before. I'm going to tell you what happened, not because I want to, because I need someone to know, and because if you're watching this, you may be the only one left who can understand what it means. Person 95 came on day 10. A man who ran toward the chain from the tree line off the country road like he'd been waiting for us. 96 and 97 were a brother and a sister who had driven 11 hours from out of state. Their mother had been attached since day 4, and they had come to help her. I tried to warn them. 98 was a teenager who touched the chain on a dare while his friends filmed it. They weren't laughing when it happened. I want to be clear about that. None of them were laughing. 99 was a woman who said she was a doctor and that she had a theory. She said the word adhesion and something about electromagnetic fields, and then her hand closed on the person in front of her, and the theory ended there. We were 99 for 11 hours. I counted every one of them. I knew what happened at 100, and I kept thinking irrationally that if it just never reached 100, then maybe the chain would hold. Maybe I could find another way. Stahl was working on something, a counter-ritual, a way to address the spirit directly, something from a secondary source he'd found, and I kept walking and counting and waiting for his call. It never came. There was a girl who had been walking alongside the parade for 3 days, not behind it, beside it. maybe 16, earbuds in, filming herself against the backdrop of the chain like it was scenery. I noticed her on day 8 and assumed she was one of the spectators who'd followed in the margins. The ones who stayed close but kept enough distance to convince themselves they were just watching. On day 11, she looked at me. Not at the chain, not at Gerald, at me, like she knew something I hadn't figured out yet. Then she reached out and touched the hand of the person at the very back of the chain. I watched it happen and I couldn't move fast enough to stop it. Her hand locked on. The laughter took her immediately, harder and faster than it had taken anyone else, like the curse had been holding its breath, waiting for her specifically. She didn't look frightened. That was the part that stayed with me. Every other person had looked frightened. She just looked like someone who had finally done the thing they had been building toward for a long time. The moment her hand closed, something changed. Gerald went cold. Not temperature cold, something else. A cold that moved up through my palms and into my wrists and kept going past my elbows, past my shoulders, setting somewhere behind my sternum like a key turning in a lock I didn't know I had. I felt whatever had been living in the goose since I picked it up in Margot's second life pull back, not disappear, relocate. The laughing stopped. All of it, all at once. 99 people who had been laughing in waves and cycles and undercurrents all went silent in the same instant. And then they let go. One by one, from the back forward, the chain released. Hands opened. People fell to their knees. Some of them wept. Some of them sat in the road and stared at their own palms like they were reading something written there in a language they'd almost recognized. Gerald lifted out of my hands. I don't mean someone took him. I mean he rose smoothly, the way a stone rises when you release it into water, and traveled down the length of the chain to where the girl was standing. He settled in her arms. She caught him without looking, the way you catch something you've been waiting a long time to receive. My hands were empty for the first time in 11 days. Blythe grabbed my arm, her free hand, her own hand, and she held on hard, and she said, "You did it. You held on long enough. You did it." I couldn't explain what I'd just watched happen. I couldn't form the sentence. I just stood there with my empty hands open at my sides while 99 people wept and embraced each other all around me. The girl was already walking. I'm writing this 8 days after the chain broke. I'm at home. I'm sitting at my kitchen table. Pretzel is on the windowsill, and the shelf of odd objects is exactly where I left it, and the bass guitar clock is ticking, and everything in my apartment is exactly as I left it 11 days ago, which should feel like comfort and mostly just feels like a theater set. My hands are still empty. I keep checking. Stahl called the morning after the release. He had found a final passage in the monastery record, a postscript, added by a different hand than the rest, someone who came after the original author and apparently felt compelled to add something the first writer had left out. The passage describes the moment the goose transfers to the 100th person. It says, "The bearer at the front is released, returned to their life, intact." It says the 100th becomes the new bearer and walks until their own parade forms and completes, and then the goose moves again and again, person to person, century to century, the same ritual cycling forward through time. The Postscript also mentioned the original bearer by name, though the name itself hadn't survived the water damage. What had survived was a single notation about him, that he was seen years after his own release, standing at the edge of a second parade in a different village, and years after that at a third in a town 2 days' ride from the first. The manuscript doesn't explain how he came to be there. It doesn't say whether he was drawn back against his own will, or whether he simply couldn't stop himself from looking. It only records that he was present, that he'd tried to warn the 100th person each time, that they touched the chain anyway, every time. The girl knew exactly what she was doing. I'm certain of that now. She had done her research, found the same translated fragments Stahl had found, and understood the mechanics better than I did. She chose this. She walked beside the parade for 3 days, waiting for the count to reach 99, and then she stepped forward. I don't know why anyone would choose it. I don't know what she wanted badly enough to carry that thing for the rest of her life. But here's what keeps me from sleeping. I deleted my original video the morning after the chain broke. It didn't matter. By then, it had been downloaded and reposted hundreds of times across every platform I know of, and several I don't. The combined view count across all the reposts, the last time Stahl checked, was somewhere above 40 million. I have no way to touch any of those uploads. They belong to other people now. The girl posted her own video 4 days ago on a new account nobody had seen before. It's already at 9 million views. She's walking. Gerald is in her arms, head tilted. She's speaking directly to the camera. Calm and almost pleasant, the way someone speaks when they have all the time in the world. She says, "If you've seen this video, you already know what happens next." She says, "Don't be afraid." She says, "Just find me." I posted a warning video of my own on the same day. I laid out everything I know, everything Stahl found, every passage and manuscript and illustration of open mouths. I kept it short so people would actually watch it. Mine has 40,000 views. Hers has 9 million. Nobody is reading my comment. They're reading hers. And somewhere in the back of your mind right now, you're wondering where she is. You're thinking about clicking her profile. You're thinking it can't be real. You watched a man carry a Golden Goose statue for 11 days, and you're still not sure it was real. And that uncertainty is the only thing the curse needs. I can't stop you. I couldn't stop the girl. I couldn't stop 99 people who walked right up to something they could see was wrong and reached out anyway. All I can do is tell you that the girl holds Gerald the same way I did, same grip, same posture, and her head is tilted at the same angle as Gerald's now. I don't know when they started that. I hope you're enjoying my Grim Truth Horror Story series. It's great fun to narrate these for you. If you are, a like, a comment, or hitting the subscribe button is greatly appreciated. Or you can buy me a coffee if you're feeling extra generous and really want to help out my channel. And be sure to check out more with the links.